You know that feeling when you're listening to Japanese and it feels like you're hearing a few different languages all mixed into one? Well, you're not wrong. Japanese vocabulary is kind of like a skyscraper. It's got this ancient foundation, a really classical core, and then this super modern global facade. Today, we're going to explore all of those layers.
So, how on earth is that even possible? I mean, how can a single language have the DNA of ancient homegrown words, classical Chinese, and modern European loanwords all working together? It's a fascinating puzzle, and we're about to unpack it.
The secret is that Japanese didn't just grow, it was built, layer by layer, over centuries. You can almost think of it as linguistic archaeology. We're going to grab our tools and dig down through the history of the language one word layer at a time. Okay, so this table right here, this is basically our map for the journey. The entire massive Japanese vocabulary can pretty much be sorted into these four buckets, or goshu as they're called. You've got wago, the native words, kango, the words from China, gairaigo, the loan words from everywhere else, and konshugo, the modern mashups. So let's start at the very bottom, right at the bedrock of it all. The native words, the ones we call wagalo. Wago, sometimes called Yamato Kotaba, are the original words of Japan. I mean, these are the words that have been there from the very beginning. They're the soul of the language, the absolute core of how people communicated. And this shows you exactly what Wago words do. They cover the really fundamental stuff around us, mountain, river. They express core human emotions and simple everyday actions. But here's the most important part. They're also the grammatical glue, all those little particles and conjunctions that hold literally every single Japanese sentence together. Okay, now let's climb up to the next layer, to a moment in history that totally reshaped the language, the massive arrival of Chinese vocabulary, which we call Kangol. Kanji are words that were either borrowed directly from Chinese or were actually created in Japan using Chinese characters. They brought this whole new level of sophistication to the language, and you'll often see them used for more formal, academic, or abstract ideas. This slide shows the difference perfectly. The native Wago word hohoemi is that warm, genuine smile you'd share with a friend. But the Congo word basho is more like a faint smile, something you'd probably read in a book. It's the same basic idea, but the texture, the feel, is completely different. It's all about nuance. But check this out. Here's a really cool twist. Some of these Congo words weren't even originally Chinese. Take the word sotoba for these Buddhist grave markers. It actually comes from the Sanskrit word stupa. It literally traveled from India through China and finally landed in Japan, where it was adopted as a Congo word. Wild, right? And this is so important. Japan didn't just borrow words, it innovated with the tools it borrowed. During the Meiji Restoration, when Japan was modernizing like crazy, scholars invented thousands of new Kongo. These are called Wasei Kongo, to translate Western ideas like society, philosophy, and economy. They used this ancient system to build a completely modern vocabulary. All right, the third layer brings us into the modern world and contact with the West. These are the gairaigo, which means words that were borrowed from languages other than Chinese. And these words didn't arrive all at once. They came in waves. Way back in the 16th century, Portuguese and Dutch traders brought words like pan for bread and kohi for coffee. Then, during the Meiji era, you get German medical terms like allergy for allergy and French words for food and art, like gourmet for gourmet. And now? Well, now it's just a constant flood of words from English. Some of these loan words are so old, they've completely become part of the furniture. Take tobacco from Portuguese. It's been in the language for so long that people will sometimes write it with its own unique kanji characters, just like a native word. It's like a linguistic immigrant that's been granted full citizenship. Okay, so what happens when you take all these different layers, the native words, the Chinese words, the European words, and you just throw them all into a blender? Well, you get our fourth and final category, konshugo. Konshugo are just hybrid words, and they show how incredibly playful and flexible the language is today. You can take a native Wago word like ha for tooth and just tack on the English word brush to get habarashi. Or a super formal Congo term for closing a store gets combined with the English word sale to become a heiten sale. It's like linguistic Lego, pieces from totally different historical boxes just snapped together. All right, now for the grand finale. You might be thinking these categories are just neat labels for linguists, but what if I told you the language itself remembers where every single word came from? What if you could actually hear the history in the way a word is pronounced?
This whole phenomenon is called rendaku. It's a really subtle sound change rule. Basically, when two words join together to make a new one, the first consonant of the second word often gets, well, softer. A hard K sound might turn into a softer G, or a sharp S sound will turn into a buzzing Z. Here's the classic example. You take the word for blue, ao, and the word for sky, sora. You put them together and you don't get ao sora, you get ao zora. Can you hear it? The s in sora voices up into a Z sound. That's rendaku in action. And this is the incredible part. This little sound rule acts like a historian. For native Wago words, rendaku happens all the time, just like an aozora. For Chinese Congo words, it happens sometimes, but not always. But for modern foreign loanwords, the gairaigo, it almost never happens. That's why you say aisukahi for iced coffee, and you would never say aisugohi. The pronunciation itself is a clue to the word's origin. It's amazing. So it really all boils down to this. The sounds themselves remember their history. These categories we've been talking about, they aren't just abstract ideas in a textbook. They are literally baked into the very pronunciation of the words.
When you really think about it, the Japanese language is a living museum. Every single word you hear, whether it's for something timeless like a mountain or something modern like a cup of coffee, carries within it a story of culture, of trade, and of centuries of history.
And that just leaves us with one final, fascinating question. With this nonstop flood of new words coming in from English and other languages, what new rules, what new sounds, what new kinds of hybrid words are just around the corner? What is the next layer of Japanese history going to sound like?